Good morning and welcome to BBOC Live presented by BetMGM. It's 10:30 a.m. Eastern and this is the Week 2 college football betting preview. I'm Stuckey and joining me, as always, are my BBOC podcast co-host Collin Wilson and the one and only Mr. Brett McMurphy. Have a lot to get to today. We'll each give our three best bets. We'll talk about two marquee games, obviously Texas, Alabama, and of course, the game that everyone seems to be betting, Colorado, Nebraska. We'll also check in with one of our other fellow co-hosts, Mike Calabrese, for his group of five best bet. And of course, we'll check in with the universally loved and respected Mr. Darren Ravel for a market report and his weekly Fade Ravel pick. He has not hit one yet. We all have our fingers crossed that he's not going to pick something that we're on. Before we get started, I do want to remind everyone to make sure you download the award-winning Action Network app. You can find all of our bets there, in addition to an abundance of data and content for today's slate and beyond. And also a word from our sponsor, BetMGM. BBOC is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get a first bet offer up to $1,500. Terms and conditions do apply. Again, that is bonus code ACTION to get a first bet offer up to $1,500. Before we do get started, Collin, how many family members of yours are in the chat? Yeah, in the chat this week?
I think my mom might be making dinner plans. If anyone's getting the YouTube chat, she was chatting me up. I think she knows Tex exists, but we'll see. I know that she's trying to win herself a new refrigerator, so we'll see. Hopefully she takes our advice today.
All right, maybe we'll have to get some contests going to win refrigerators, but let's check in with the leaderboard as Collin and his family prepare for a warm-up game with Kent State. But I'm in the lead here. No surprise after last year. Brett, you going to bring the real winners this week?
Yeah, I want to make it interesting. I'll spot you a couple of wins.
Right, I'd like an asterisk after James Franklin last week. I'd like an asterisk next to my record. The half-point hook on UCLA. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, the bad beats last weekend were out in full force, so hopefully we can avoid some landmines this week. But let's get right into it with our best bets, our first best bets of the day. I'll kick things off with my Rice Owls, going back to the well with Rice here against Houston. Houston's in a pretty tricky spot. They survived UTSA. Next week, it's their Big 12 opener against TCU. A little bit of a letdown here. These two teams played last year at Houston, and it was a dead even game. I think the teams were separated by 1 yard and 10 seconds of time possession. Rice actually led late in the fourth quarter before a scoop and score. Dana Holgerson's teams notoriously have struggled in this spot as bigger favorites. I think he's 3-10 against the spread as a favorite of 9+ at Houston, and he's about, I think, 37% in his career as a favorite of more than a field goal. But what you've seen historically, especially at Houston, is they'll come out just lackadaisical and they'll dig themselves a hole. And in this particular spot, I think that is a really high possibility of happening. I think Rice's offense will be better with JT Daniels in his second start. So I like Rice in this spot in a little intra-city game. Collin, will you be tweeting out some Owl gifts with me, and where are you going for your first best bet?
Absolutely. We both love Rice. We had that pegged early in the week. I'm with you there on that bet. I'm going to head over to the ACC, where Notre Dame is going to come down to the Carolinas. Sam Hartman returns after playing a number of years at Wake Forest. I'm going to take NC State here and the points and this is a 3-3-5 defense led by defensive coordinator Tony Gibson. He has given Sam Hartman 2 of his 3 worst days ever as a quarterback from adjusted completion percentage issue. Last 2 times Sam Hartman has faced the Wolfpack defense, he's had 6 interceptions. So it's kind of been a house of horrors, him going up against NC State. Then when you go to the other side of the ball, I love Brennan Armstrong at quarterback, but we've said this on the podcast for years that if a defense is undisciplined in tackling and they're having issues with arm tackles, bad angles, and allowing extra yards, Brennan Armstrong is going to capitalize. Right now, PFF ranks Notre Dame 95th in tackle grading, and that's against Tennessee State and Navy, where they haven't even allowed a touchdown yet this year. So I'm going to take NC State. I'm going to take all those points. I'm going to take the Brennan Armstrong scramble and score. Let's go, Tuffy.
There you go. Bringing the helmet out. Yeah, teams playing their third game after winning and covering as favorites in their first 2 historically have been horrendous against the spread. I agree. I think we're getting value on NC State here. because of what Notre Dame has done against nobodies. Now, look, Notre Dame could be great. We just don't know, and I think we're getting a good number here. Hopefully, Robert Anaya opens up that offense a little bit more, but there's definitely still some questions I have with Notre Dame along the defensive line and that wide receiver that weren't going to be answered against Navy and Eddie George's FCS team. Brett, where you headed?
I'm looking at Virginia Tech and Purdue. Last time Brent Pry faced Ryan Walters, they were defensive coordinators at Penn State and Illinois 2 years ago. 9 overtimes later, Penn State won 20-18. We're not going to see 9 OTs today, I don't think. I just got issues with Purdue. I like Virginia Tech as a small favorite. Purdue was outgained at home last week by 135 yards by Fresno State with a new quarterback. Purdue's got some offensive line issues. Virginia Tech, people look at the score. They beat ODU by 19 or 20. You look a little bit closer into the box score. Virginia Tech had 4 drives that got inside ODU's 13-yard line. They only got 3 points out of that. I think they're going to break out this week. I think Virginia Tech's really going to be improved this year. I think Purdue's going to struggle this first year with new coach Ryan Walters. Give me the Hokies at home with Sandman as a small favorite.
Brett rolling with a little enter Sandman to get things started. Yeah, Fresno State absolutely carved Purdue up last week. Very, very poor defensive effort. All right, let's talk the biggest game of the day, although some from a betting perspective, it might be Colorado, Nebraska, but the biggest game from a national perspective, national title, college football playoff, Alabama, Texas. Alabama's sitting at around a 7-point favorite. It's been pretty steady throughout the week. Over-under has come down a tick to 53.5. I like Texas here. Really like them at 7.5. Still like them at 7. I had these teams coming into the season power rated pretty evenly. Throw in home field for Alabama, and I have to still take the touchdown here with Texas, who has finally built up its team to an SEC, elite caliber roster. They have the depth, right? The offensive line is there now. The defense is there. The only question I have is at quarterback, but I have similar questions at quarterback with Alabama. If you watch that game early against Middle Tennessee, and I was on Alabama last week, there was a lot of penalties for Middle Tennessee. So that game just kind of slipped away from a clearly inferior team. But this week, it's a different story. Texas can match them position for position. I think that they can have success in that interior of the defensive line. It's really just going to come down to Quinn Ewers. That's my only concern. Can he complete the deep ball? I'm assuming Alabama's going to make him beat them deep like TCU did last year. He was 38% last year in balls that traveled 15-plus yards. Last week against Rice, 0 of 7 on his deep balls, missed worthy twice. That's going to be a key early on, but I can't pass up taking the touchdown plus here on Texas. Hook 'em. Collin, you disagree?
I completely disagree. And the thing is I have this number way lower. I have this number at about 3.5. So you would think that I would take Texas, but after watching that tape against Rice, look, we've already taken Rice on this show. After watching that tape against Rice, they dominated the Texas offensive line. This was supposed to be a strength of this team. Rice had 8 tackles for loss. Quinn Ewers was pressured all day. This isn't supposed to happen against Rice, and it has nothing to do with having a vanilla playbook before they play Alabama. It's just a problem in the trench where they are not able to protect Quinn Ewers, and they couldn't get any running game going whatsoever. And that's going to be a serious problem because this is going to be a physical grind. And when you go to the other side of the ball, Steve Sarkisian came out in his presser last week and said a mobile quarterback would have hurt us today because of their pass rush integrity. And what that means is the defensive ends are flying up 8 yards up the field. The defensive interiors are not keeping their lanes. And when you can't do that in your pass rush, Jalen Milroe is going to take off and have explosive plays. So I'm all over Bama today, -7.
I disagree with Brett. You are going to break the tie here. Are you going with your beloved Tide?
I'm going with Texas. I don't. What's happened with Collin? I thought he was, Sark was his boy. He's picking Alabama. Stuck, I agree with a lot of things you said. I like Texas getting the points here. I mean, look, the Longhorns, they played everything close to the vest against Rice. And look, Rice, who knows? They may actually be better than we think. So I don't think there was any motivation for playing Rice. And then you look at Alabama historically, when Nick Saban's at about a 7-8 point favorite, they struggle, at least by Saban standards. I think Texas can keep this close. And if you really believe that Texas can win this game, How about this? Instead of taking Texas on the money line, you should immediately go and put down a future on Quinn Ewers to win the Heisman. 3 of the last 5 quarterbacks to win in Tuscaloosa went on to win the Heisman. Joe Burrow, Johnny Manziel, and Cam Newton. Hook 'em.
Yeah, it could be a Heisman highlight reel for Ewers, but he's got to hit some of those deep balls early on. But I completely agree with you. I think Texas can hang here and is certainly live. They have all those talented skill position players against the secondary that lost a lot and is a little banged up too. Could be a major difference. All right, let's jump right into our second best bet of the day. I'll kick things off with another underdog in similar range as Rice. Let's go with Arizona, a team that I was looking to back early on against the team in Mississippi State. I was looking to fade early on once they kind of stepped up in competition. I think there's going to be some growing pains for this offense during a scheme transition. And on the defensive side of the ball, Mississippi State, after losing cornerbacks in the first round in back-to-back years, I think the secondary is very vulnerable against an Arizona explosive passing attack led by Jaden DeLara at quarterback. I think they'll be able to take advantage downfield. I think this is a close game throughout. I'll happily take over a touchdown here. Bear down. Collin, where are you headed?
I'm going to go G5. We took East Carolina last week on the podcast, cash for us against Michigan. I'm going to take them again this week. Pirates surprised on defense against Michigan last week with a respectable cover, above national average on offense when it came to rushing and passing the ball. And then on defense, they stuffed 13 of 31 rushing attempts by Michigan. That's above the 30% national average. I expect that to come today against a Marshall team that was losing to Albany in the fourth quarter. The Great Danes are not even close to being a good FCS team, and Marshall almost lost to them. Offense was horrific in pass downs, and the defense allowed the Great Danes 4 drives to be methodical. You say, what's a methodical drive? It's at least 10 plays in a drive. Marshall allowed that to happen 4 times to Albany. So give me East Carolina today +3.
Yeah, I do agree there. We'll see how Mike Houston juggles the quarterback situation, which is something to watch at ECU. Brett, where are you headed?
Yeah, I'm taking an over. Florida Atlantic and Ohio, over 61.5. When news broke earlier this week that quarterback Rourke would be back for Ohio, the number jumped 3 points from 58 to 61.5. I agree with that move. Last year, these teams played 41-38, 79 points. And you look at the entire season last year for FAU, that was the most points they had scored in a game, except against, Charlotte's Club Lit and a dreadful FIU team. So I expect FAU with Tom Herman and Casey Thompson to put up a lot of points. Also with Rourke back, Ohio is going to be a much different team than we saw the first 2 weeks against San Diego State. With the Maple Missile, I like the number to go over, and I would not be surprised if Ohio wins this thing outright.
Thank you for getting Charlotte and my clublet a mention on the show. And yeah, if you go back to when Rourke started off the season, they were slicing and dicing up and down the field before he got hurt, and they pulled him. So go points there. Let's take a break in the action and check in with Mike Calabrese for his Group of 5 best bet.
Thanks, Stuck. For this week, my favorite play on the board is over 67 between UTSA and Texas State, and a lot has been made about the new clock rules, fewer plays, fewer possessions. I don't think it's going to matter in this one because both teams want to play with tempo, and Texas State, they set the world on fire there in week 1, coming hot out of the gates. As a 4-touchdown underdog, they dropped 42 points on Dave Aranda and that Baylor defense. They win outright, and now they're going down to San Antonio, checking out the Riverwalk, and then checking out a UTSA offense that needs to get off the mat after being held to just 14 points playing Houston in week 1. That Doug Belk defense, that $1 million man as the defensive coordinator there for the Cougars, really put them in a vice grip. 7th-year senior Dr. Frank Harris throws 3 picks in that game. If he doesn't, I think that game ends up going UTSA's way. And this is a perfect bounce back spot against a Texas State defense that's put together with Scotch tape and super glue. G.J. Kinney, the head coach for Texas State, came in from Incarnate Word after leading the Cardinals to the FCS semis last year. His offense averaged over 51 points per game. And he pulled essentially a pseudo Sanders, 49 new faces on this team. Offensively, it was an overnight success story, but I think defensively, the bottom could drop out here against a Roadrunner team that's kind of primed for a bounce back spot here at home on the fast carpet in the Alamo Dome. Kavorian Barnes is a name to keep an eye on in this one. He looked really bouncy in the opener. They ended up having to kind of abandon the run a little bit, but he looked good, over 100 yards rushing against a stout Houston defense. I think he goes off in this game. They have perfect offensive balance. They score north of, let's call it 40 points, which is really going to aid the over here. That's sitting at 67. I'd play it all the way up to 69.5. Let's go for a shootout in G5 country for my best play of week 2. All right, back to you guys.
Thanks, Mike. Before we continue on, we still have another best bet to get to. We'll talk Nebraska, Colorado, and also with Darren Ravel for a market report. It's time for our weekly round robin moneyline parlay. Collin, why don't you get us kicked off with an anchor?
Yeah, let's do Central Florida up at Boise. There wasn't a good home favorite that's short this week that I wanted to get us into, but I do believe Central Florida is going to win at Boise State today. I am not a believer of this Bush Hamden offense that wants Talon Green to hang out in the pocket and be a pocket passer all day. Then when you flip to the defensive side of the ball, Washington had some resistance running the ball against Boise, which is what John Reese Plumlee is going to do for Central Florida. But throwing the ball, the Boise secondary was just in shambles. And I expect UCF to have a ton of success today on offense. So let's start off with the Knights.
Yeah, that Boise team, I think, lost 7 players from the defense that are now playing professionally somewhere. I'll throw out UConn here, small road dog. I think that, I liked some of the things I saw from their new quarterback, Fagnano, and the defense last week against NC State. I did not like anything I saw from Georgia State. And from a matchup perspective, I think that this UConn defense can take away Carroll, Granger, and the rushing attack of Georgia State. And if you can do that, you completely cripple that offense. So let's go with UConn.
Love it. Let's go take Texas Tech. Let's get weird tonight. Some tortillas going to be flying on the field as defensive coordinator Tim DeRuyter and quarterback Chug completely try to redeem themselves after being escorted out of Eugene. I think it was a little bit of an overinflation of the box score from Oregon last week, putting the hammer down, and then, Texas Tech losing in Laramie. But if you break down that box score against Wyoming, Texas Tech didn't really do anything to hurt themselves. They just had some red zone issues. And if there's any regression to the red zone, then they would have won that game by 10 last week. So let's go ahead and take the Red Raiders here at home. Oregon, Bo Nix on the road has never been a profitable ticket whatsoever.
Yeah, sorry, Brett, but I'm going to throw in Arizona State. Weird things happen out there in Tempe, including maybe we'll get some dust. Who knows? But this Oklahoma State team's a mess, a team that I want to play against. We might see 3 quarterbacks again, including Gundy's kid. They still haven't had that situation sorted out. Let's go with the Sun Devils.
Let's wrap it up with San Diego State taking some massive steam in the market against UCLA. There's a couple of things going on for UCLA here. First, Chip Kelly is committed to how many snaps each quarterback is going to get. He said Colin Schlee didn't get any snaps last week. He's going to get him this week, and that eats into Dante Moore. Don't expect Dante Moore to get any extra available playing time until schedule against the Pac-12. They're just going to limit him, and that kind of limits UCLA and what they can do offensively. When you go to the other side of the ball, Letu is going to put pressure on Jalen Maiden, and then Maiden is going to be flush from the pocket, and that's where he does his best work, running around, doing scrambles, designed runs, and hitting guys down and in between the hash marks. They're going to cause some problems here for the UCLA defense. So give me San Diego State outright.
All right, going with a big dog. Hopefully we can get one of those home like ULM last week. But let's take another break in the action and check in with the universally loved and admired Mr. Darren Ravel for his market report, and then, of course, his Fade Ravel pick.
Good morning, guys. Glad to be here and to give you a market report this morning. Let's start with Notre Dame, a 7.5-point favorite over NC State. They're getting 88% of the bets and 81% of the money. Utah, a 7-point favorite over woeful Baylor, getting 89% of the bets and 87% of the money. Then let's take Florida State, a 31-point favorite over Southern Miss, getting 84% of the bets and 74% of the money. Of course, everyone's high on the Seminoles train after the LSU game. Texas, a 7.5-point dog at Bama. Bama getting 63% of the bets and 57% of the money. Oklahoma covering as an 1,000,000-point favorite last week, now a 16-point favorite over SMU, getting 83% of the bets and 76% of the money. And finally, guys, I have been covering the business of sports and have been a huge fan of college football and have covered that as well for 23 years. And I have never seen the hype train with Coach Prime and what is going on at University of Colorado in Folsom Field. Obviously coming off last week's TCU win, now playing Nebraska. Get-in price is top 5 already of regular season games this year, about $500. And there are even some sports books that have a Colorado button at the top because there's so much interest. Just unbelievable. Listen, I think the hype is there. I am a square, and I'm going to play the square game. I'll play them at 3. I'll play them at 2.5. I'm going with the Buffaloes, baby. I can't, given where Nebraska's been over the years, I just can't do it. And I know Nebraska was going to be like a whatever, more than a touchdown favorite. And now this game has changed everything. I think at Folsom Field at home, I think Colorado is going to roll. If you really want to do a parlay on it, I don't think that these teams are going to score 58.5. I think Nebraska has a better defense than the Hold Frogs, the holy defense, the Swiss cheese defense of TCU. So I like the under if you want to do a same game parlay there. But I'm going to be as square as could be, and I'm going with prime time, baby.
Thanks, Darren. RIP to the millions, it seems, of Colorado backers out there. Darren has just mushed you all. Maybe he's due. Last week, he went with Hawaii in week 0 and then a parlay of San Jose State and the under, which both lost. So maybe he's due. But it's a good transition into the other marquee matchup that we wanted to talk about, which is Nebraska, Colorado. Colorado, small favorite here. This number has seen a lot of movement from early openers to where it sits now at 2.5, 3. Colorado hosting Nebraska after their big upset last week. I personally have nothing on this game. I just don't know where to price Colorado. This is an unprecedented situation. It's a new era of college football. Blow up a whole team, bring in a whole new staff and all new players. You don't want to overreact to one game and adjust too much, but I just don't. I need to see more data before I get involved with this Colorado team. So I'm sitting back, watching, going to enjoy the show, and everyone's sweating their Colorado tickets. If I had to guess, knowing these two teams, like Colorado wins on a blocked field goal at the end, because that's what Nebraska does. Nebraska will be close and somehow find a way to lose a close game. Pass for me. I just have no idea where to price this Colorado team, but definitely an impressive effort last week, especially from the offense, which I didn't think was going to operate that efficiently against the TCU defense with their offensive line. Collin, you do have a play here.
Yeah, I do. I took Colorado early in the week, hit them on the opener, and it pays to have the action app because that number was minus 125-ish earlier when they opened up. Right now, I'm still sticking with Colorado on the money line. If the juice police don't get onto me for taking one that's steamed this high, but you're right. I don't know where to price Colorado. I moved them 13 points in the power ratings. I projected this game to be 3, which is exactly where it is. But, there's just a massive amount of money on Colorado. I don't think bettors know what to do. I don't think odds makers know what to do with them. And that's because the Colorado style of play is not sustainable whatsoever. They won that game last week on defensive havoc. Travis Hunter with 3 PBUs, an INT that was important. And then you flipped, and they never stopped TCU from moving up and down the field, 70% of available yards. And then when you flip to the other side of the ball, Colorado lived in third downs. They converted half of them, and their average distance to go was 11 yards. That's not sustainable. But Nebraska doesn't have the ability to expose that. They're good at running the ball. They're good at stopping the run. Those don't apply here. So I'm going to roll with the hot Colorado for one more week. I'm going to go money line, avoid, this crazy special teams that might land this game 1 or 2. And you know what? When Colorado gets to Pac-12 player in a couple of weeks, I'm going to fade them like crazy.
Yeah, I will say the masses could be right here. They could be ahead of, just because everyone's on it doesn't mean it can't win. They could be ahead of odds makers, professional bettors who don't want to adjust too much, and maybe they're ahead of the curve. So much uncertainty here. Brett, you have anything?
Yeah, you guys are crazy. Look, college football is so much motivation, so much more than professional football. You guys know that. You use that angle throughout the year. This is the ultimate letdown spot for Colorado. What has Nebraska heard all week about how they have no chance? They're coming in here. Colorado's been patted on the back all week, how great they are. Everyone believes in them, yada, yada, yada. They go from being a touchdown underdog projected before the season against Nebraska. Now they're a 3-point favorite. The great Evan Abram for us looked this up for me. Teams that win as an underdog of more than 14 points and then are a favorite the next week cover at less than a 50% clip. Collin, you said Nebraska's running game doesn't matter. TCU averaged 7 yards a carry against Colorado. Why didn't they keep running the ball? I don't know. Ultimately, look, I got my Colorado shirt right here. So I do like the Buffs, just not in this situation. And also, you just fold this a little bit, and then suddenly, you have Darren Ravel picking Colorado, it turns into an L. I like the Huskers outright.
Good luck to Jeff. I mean, when Jeff Sims tucks the ball, I mean, that is a scary proposition against his defense, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see if Sims can avoid the turnovers that seem to plague him as well. A lot of Collin versus Brett head-to-heads today. We will see who comes out.
If it's like golf, we know who will win that battle.
Me by one stroke.
No, never. Never's happened. Has never happened.
Brett, you mentioned a nice situational spot. That's where we're going to start with our third best bet. I'm on the same page as you today, Brett. Hopefully that's a good thing. We're both on Texas, and we're both on Texas Tech. I think this is a great spot to back the Red Raiders. Very underrated home field advantage, especially in these spots. I think they're the 5th most profitable team against the spread at home over the past 25 seasons. Over 70% against the spread against non-conference opponents. And look, Oregon, they put up 81 against Portland State last week. I think they're getting a little bit too much love for that. Portland State is dreadful. Texas Tech went up 17-0 against Wyoming, kind of went to sleep. They've been looking ahead to this game with their old coordinator and their quarterback. Used to be at Oregon. They've been wanting this game. I think this is a great bounce back spot for Tyler Shuck and company. I like the Red Raiders with the points. Collin?
Yeah, I'm going to go to the Tulane Ole Miss game, and I know the graphic says 7.5, but there's not a 7.5 out there anywhere. It's at 8.5 almost everywhere, and that's because of the news of Michael Pratt. There's some questionable out there about whether he's going to play. He hasn't been called out yet, but that's why there's been steam in this market this morning. I am sticking with Tulane. I would say check around 2 p.m. Eastern when the teams take the field to see if Pratt's out there warming up. But I'm going to go with Tulane here. We can grade it on 8 if you want, but the Green Wave has to stop Ole Miss from a rushing perspective and a passing perspective. Jackson Dart to Trey Harris, that was 4 touchdowns last week. But the good news is the secondary and the defensive line for Tulane Green Wave is the best in the AAC. Their corners they have, Jarius Monroe, Lance Robinson had 13 PBUs last year. They had a pick last week against South Alabama. They can actually throw a couple hurdles in that Ole Miss offense, kind of stop them up. And then Tulane, they absolutely dominated South Alabama last week at the line of scrimmage. They had 7 tackles for loss. So we'll see what happens on the offensive side of the ball. That's the reason why there's steam in the market. So I'd say wait till about 2:00 to see if Pratt's playing. But if he's playing, this is a Tulane play all the way.
Yeah, we'll see if Tulane can keep up its covering prowess at home. Most profitable team against the spread at home since Fritz took over as head coach. They have been a cash cow there. Brett, I know your best bet, third best bet is the same as mine with Texas Tech. Anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, Stuckey nailed it. The Wyoming game for Texas Tech, I mean, that they were looking past that to Oregon. Even though they were looking past it, they still outgained Wyoming by 100 yards. Yeah, they lost an OT. They jump out to a big lead. I think, quite frankly, they got bored. And yeah, Oregon State scored 81 points against Portland State. Congrats. Everyone will score 50 against Portland State. The good news is Oregon's duck will not be, his arms will get a break this week. Last week, he did 546 push-ups. That ain't going to happen this week. Tyler Shuck for Texas Tech going against his old team. I picked Joey McGuire's club to win the Big 12. This obviously does not impact the Big 12, but I think Texas Tech is in a great spot here. I think people are putting too much value into that Portland State win, similar to I think people are putting too much stock into the Colorado win against TCU. And I like Texas Tech, especially when you're getting almost 7.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. It's a good buy low spot here. And I still have questions about that Oregon secondary. And it is still Road Bo Nix, where He has not performed as well. All right, that will do it for us. Thanks to Darren and Mike for checking in. Thanks, as always, to Brett, and Collin. And thanks, of course, to our audio and video producers on the back end. The show went a lot smoother than usual because Barb's at the helm with Charlie out of town. So shout out to her. Thanks, of course, to all of you for tuning in. We will see you at the same time next weekend, Saturday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, for the Week 3 college football slate. Also, make sure you check out the award-winning Action Network app, where you can find all of our bets, in addition to an abundance of data and content for today's slate and beyond. BBOC podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back with a recap. Don't forget about the voicemails, 959-BAD-BEAT, and the new BCS show with myself, Collin, and Brett. As always, we'll be out early week, but this year we'll be doing it live Tuesday, 10 a.m. Eastern. So make sure you check that out. We'll see you then. Good luck today, and the action is underway now. Have a day, and we'll see you next week.